Football Club has to fulfil its fixtures, and the Football League sat down with us and agreed that there was too much risk of not being able to fulfil its fixtures without a ground share.
That's the Sky Blues Chief Executive Tim Fisher talking to me earlier on this morning, on the day after the Football League backed the club's plans to ground share with Northampton for the next 3 seasons. The Football League said it had made the decision with regret, and its chairman, Greg Clark, urged the Sky Blues' new owners, Otium, and the company which runs the Ricoh Arena, ACL, to keep trying to resolve their differences so that the club can stay at the Ricoh. Tim Fisher, though, said this morning that looking to the future, looking to the future for the club away from the Ricoh.
We have to move the club forward. This is only a temporary ground share. Let's be very mindful of that. We've got an exciting future. We are building a stadium which will own all its own revenues, and that's what this is all about. This is about financial fair play and securing the long-term future of the football club.
Let's talk about the future then and get views of a couple of football finance experts. Professor Chris Brady, he's from the Centre for Sports Business at Salford University, and David Bick is football finance expert and chairman of Square One Consulting. Gents, thanks to the both of you for being with us this morning. Chris, if I can start with you, what are we seeing here? Is this the beginning of the end, do you think?
Well, I suppose it all means what you mean by the beginning of the end. Is this the end of this particular part of the game? And I agree with you, this probably is a part of the poker game at this stage. Then probably we are closing in on the end, and Coventry City have obviously made a bold move here in making provisions for them to move on if they still can't do the Ricoh arrangement. But I just can't believe that it was beyond. I was on sort of 3 or 4 months ago saying, and mind you, show how much of an expert I am, saying I can't believe they won't sort this out eventually, because how can you not sort this out? Well, clearly that's how much of an expert I am.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was difficult to call, but I mean, that was your thought at the time, and I have to be honest, I mean, there are still people, Chris, this morning, who think that it still won't happen. I mean, it looks, almost certain now. Are we talking 99%, Chris, certain that it's going to happen?
I'd probably still put it at sort of 90% or 85%. I still think there's a chance that everybody could see sense. But as I've been saying that for the last 12 months and nobody has seen sense, maybe I take my football optimist head off and put my finance head on and say, yes, these idiots are going to do this after all.
David, I mean, from your perspective and looking at this, I mean, the finance side of it and the fact that you've got to get the club out of administration, that could be vetoed, as we understand it, by ACL. Is it a possibility that this could all be stopped in its tracks?
I think that's always a possibility, Shane. I mean, what you've got at the moment, I think, is quite a serious mess. I mean, it's left the stadium owners obviously not collecting any rent, and there's no obvious alternative use for the stadium, and it can't be in the long run in Coventry City's best interest to play at Northampton. I mean, what sort of gates are they going to get? What sort of revenues are they going to have? So to my mind, either eventually the club comes to some arrangement with the owners of the stadium, or they do get round to developing this new stadium. But of course that needs to be financed as well. The previous owners spent an absolute fortune, and the reality of life is that City is now in the lower divisions. So either they get this new stadium, but of course let's hear some more about how that's going to get financed, or that they come to some sort of an agreement with the stadium owners, or they do wind up playing at Northampton. I do think if they wind up playing at Northampton, it's not going to be short term.
I was trying to press Tim Fisher on the finance issue this morning, David, and saying, look, how are you going to finance this stadium? And he was saying, well, part equity and part debt. I said, okay, so where's the with equity? Are you talking more from Sisu? And he said, well, yeah. I said, OK, so who else is going to come in and put money in? And it kind of all got a bit vague then. So it seemed like it was only equity from Sisu. So I said, well, where's the debt coming from? Well, and he said Sisu. So
right. Well, I was going to say, a conventional bank, Shane, is not going to lend more than 50% of a total project cost in debt. So a lot of it would have to come in the form of shares from people like Sisu anyway.
Right.
But what I don't understand here is, the ideal solution in the first place was that the club bought the stadium, bought the RICO from the current owners, because you can see it from the club's point of view. Not owning the stadium revenues is a big issue. Why now talking about Sisu funding a new stadium? Well, it begs the question: why didn't they negotiate the purchase of the RICO Stadium?
Yeah, if they wanted to buy a stadium, why not buy? Because, I mean, from what I can gather...
RICO Stadium's a magnificent stadium.
But I have to say, again, I mean, if you'd have heard Tim, and it's a shame, I haven't got to be able to drag that clip out this morning, but I also asked him about, whether the door was still open for negotiations with ACL and the Higgs Trust and the council, the people who have the RICO in their hands, as it were. And he shut that door and slammed it and locked it. And, there is no way that he wants to be talking to him. I think it's all kind of got a little bit personal, hasn't it?
Well, I think what is unfortunate, I don't know if Chris shares this view, but it does seem to me over a long period of time that the relationship between the owners of the club and the owners of the stadium has been very poor. And that's a shame, because really they should be working in harmony. For the benefit of both parties. Chris,
from your perspective, with the this part equity, part loan, it seems to all be coming from the same place. The money, from what I can gather so far. I mean, would the Football League be saying? Would they be nailing that down and saying, right, who's going to put in what and where and what are the terms if you're going to get a loan and all the rest of it? I mean, it all seems a bit airy-fairy to me, Chris.
Well, it does. I think the points that you were making about your conversation with Tim Fisher this morning are exactly right. And I agree with David that when you look at a new stadium, the idea that in 3 years' time you will have got financing, planning permission, building and everything else, so that you can leave Northampton in 3 years' time and move into this magnificent new stadium that's presumably going to be standing alongside a magnificent RICO Stadium which is empty, just seems ludicrous to me. David mentioned that the possibility that in the long term that the ground sharing with Northampton may become permanent, and that may be an option that nobody wants. So I wouldn't write off seeing Coventry City at the RICO Stadium for the first game of next season, simply because, as I said before, it's the most obvious solution for everybody. Again, as David mentioned, what a RICO Stadium, what revenues are they going to get if they haven't got a football club living in there? Maybe they could get Northampton Town to play there and buy it. And it just gets more ridiculous by the conversation. So as I say, don't. When I come on next time, do not call me a football finance expert. Really, I'm not.
Well, the trouble is with all of this, and I have to say, I mean, for whichever one of you wants to pick this one up, I mean, the problem I see as a layperson is I do a little bit of investigation. I was looking, for example, yesterday about CVAs and how they all work. And, you look at that and you think, oh, OK, well, ACL then have the possibility to be able to vote that out. Which I put to Tim, incidentally, this morning, and he said, well, fine, if the company goes into liquidation finally, then so be it, and he wasn't really worried about that. But you kind of think you know what's going to happen, and then somebody comes along and says, oh, yeah, but it's different for football. Should it be?
I don't think it should, but at the moment it is, and so people can make these sort of statements about, well, it doesn't matter, we'll go into liquidation, we'll do this, we'll be Coventry City 2013 and we'll restart again. I mean, the thing to remember is that when you look at FTSE 100 companies that existed 100 years ago, hardly any of them exist anymore, but every football club still exists virtually, so they sort of they're like yo-yo phoenixes. They sort of keep coming back over and over again. So I think Coventry City will continue to exist. Where God only knows.
I thought you were going to say like cockroaches for a minute, that old thing.
No.
We have a nuclear war and there'll be just the cockroaches and the football clubs left and everybody else will have gone. David, final word to you then. I mean, because poor old Chris, he's fed up of predicting and trying to predict what's going to happen. If you could predict an outcome, I mean, do you think this is it now? We're going to see the next 3 seasons of the Sky Blues playing at Northampton, or is it not? Is it not over yet?
If I was a betting man, Shane, that's where I'd be going, because I think the relationship as it appears between the owners of the stadium and the owners of the club it sounds irreconcilable. the CVAs really only work if there's a lot of cooperation on all sides. So I think I personally think you're going to have a ludicrous situation of an almost iconic stadium that stands out when you go up the M6, and a very fine stadium lying empty, and fans being asked to tramp across to Northampton. And I think that will be the outcome, and it's got to be the least desirable of the lot.